Welcome to the nuts and bolts of real estate. My name is Joe Bauer. I'm here with my co-host, Julie Clark. Julie, how you doing today?
I am doing fantastic, Joe. It is a beautiful July day here in 2022, and I'm leaving town. I'm leaving town in about 5 hours, so I'm excited. Where are you today?
I'm in Winter Park, Colorado, and I'm excited to hear about where you're leaving to. But just as a fun note, I was awakened this morning at 5:45 by a moose eating right next to our van, and it was chomping so loud that it woke me up. And I have a video I should share. It's not a great video, but kind of a
That
funny
is
fact.
hilarious.
Yeah.
That is awesome. You guys, if you're not following Joe's, what is it? Which channel? The Fantastic Life. He's
Yeah.
got so much fun stuff on there. If you guys love the outdoors and being healthy and all that stuff and living the van life, it is very entertaining. So go check it out. Us Clark girls are headed up to Roslyn Ridge, which is, out past Suncadia, past Roslyn. It's the girls' birthday. So I rented a house that sleeps 10 and bringing 7 of their friends up there. Yeah, that's pain. And we're hitting our favorite swimming hole and kicking around up there for a few days. So I'm excited about that. But what I'm more excited about is the fact that I feel like I've reached celebrity status. You know that? I've reached celebrity. You know why? Because I have the one and only Joe McCall along with the beautiful Mariska Pilch on my podcast today. And if you guys have not heard about Joe McCall, then you must have your head in the sand, or you must have no clue about creative finance or creative real estate deals, because Joe McCall is one of the OG. This guy's been doing lease options and teaching lease options for, I don't know, I've been following him for 10 years. It took me this long to earn enough street cred, which I really don't have. It's actually Mariska that has it, to get him on our show today. So welcome, sir, I'll say the Joe McCall. Welcome.
Well, I'm humbled, but thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I have my co-host Mariska Pilch with us today. You guys all know Mariska from Evergreen Success, as well as the upcoming host of the first annual Coeur d'Alene. How do you say it? You say it.
The Coeur d'Alene Real Estate Investing Summit in beautiful Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
It is the first annual, you guys, because the lineup is so good. We're going to save that all for the end because we have some surprises to tell you about there. So I'm excited just to kick it off. Today, we are going to teach you guys and talk about and introduce you to a resource for yourselves, both for education, getting deals done, whatever you need, about what I said it's July 2022, the number one strategy that you need to know about right now. You are crazy if you don't take the time. It's not that complicated. And we have the guy that's going to teach you the simple lease option strategies today. So let's get going with this with our new friend. Joe, can I call you a friend now?
Of course. Come on.
All right. Joe McCall. Let's kick it off. But Joe Bauer is going to kick us off with the first question we always ask everybody to get to know you a little better.
Yeah, Joe, we love to deep dive and get to know you. So if you wouldn't mind stepping back in time and giving us basically your full life history or, condensed version of that so we can get to know you and how you got to where you are today.
Well, cool. I was raised pretty poor. I didn't know it. Like my dad was a janitor, started his own cleaning business. We lived in trailer parks. I went to college, got a degree in engineering, thought that would make everything be really fun to work a 9-to-5 job. And I got tired of working in the cubic hell, as I called it. So I started studying real estate in 2005. And I started doing wholesaling, like traditional wholesaling. You buy a house for cash and sell it in 2005 and 6, and got real frustrated with, even back then, competition was really bad. And so I wanted to quit my job, but it wasn't until I started doing lease options in 2009 and specifically flipping lease options. I was doing what I call wholesaling lease options or lease option assignments in 2009. And that's when I was making more money doing that part-time than I was in my full-time job. So I quit my job in April of 2009, kind of as we were coming deep into the recession back then, and haven't looked back since. So I've been doing lease options ever since, off and on. But in 2009, I was doing lease options full time. I found they were just way easier to do, especially in a down market, which we're coming into a recession, because you could give sellers whatever price they wanted as long as they're willing to wait for it. And I didn't like negotiating with sellers, trying to beat them down in price. I didn't want to, and I couldn't go look at the houses and meet them in person. I didn't feel like I was really good at sales or talking to sellers on the phone. So I started sending text messages and voice messages to landlords who had their houses listed for rent. And I just texted them and said, hey, do you want to sell your house? And if they respond back, I say, well, I would do these conversations by text. And I would ask them what they want to sell it for. Usually it was too much. And I say, well, if I could get you that price, would you be willing to rent it for a year or two and then sell it? That wouldn't work, would it? Or something like that. So I started just finding that it was a lot easier to do these lease option deals because you didn't have to negotiate really anything. And at the time, sellers were like, yeah, sure. They just couldn't, they were worried about making next month's mortgage payment. So I started doing a lot of lease options. Fast forward a couple of years, after I'd quit my job, maybe a year or two, I started getting invitations to speak at different events. And I think one of the first events I spoke at was a real estate investment club meeting in St. Louis. And then Wendy Patton, who's been teaching lease options longer than I have, and she invited me to come speak at her boot camp or something like that. So anyway, that's my story into this whole thing, and been doing real estate for a long time, but also been teaching it and loving that because, doing my podcast now for 11 years and just the impact you can make in people's lives, literally all over the world through podcasts and YouTube and teaching and selling software and consulting and info products and things like that. So it's been a wild ride, and I love what I do.
What's your favorite part about it?
Living anywhere in the world, like Joe's doing over there. Like you can do this, run this business from anywhere in the world. Literally, all you need is an internet connection and a laptop. So I think
use VAs or
own virtual assistants, of course. Yeah. So like it was 2012. My daughter she was born in it was 2012 or 2013. So about 9 years ago, we went to Prague in the Czech Republic for 2.5 months. And I had 4 kids. My daughter was about 1.5 years at the time. And we just would work. I would do deals from Prague while we rented an Airbnb, or at the time it was a VRBO, or homeaway.com, I think is what it was. So we rented a place for 2.5 months and just lived there and worked there. When you get your system set up, you only need to work 3 hours a day on your business, really. And that's mainly like in meetings or in, maybe a few phone calls. But the cool thing about traveling is your window of availability that you can work is shrunk because of the time zone changes. So I was 7 hours ahead or something like that. And so the only window that I could actually get any work kind of done was like in between 2 or 3 hours, right? Because of the time zone change. So anyway, it forced me to really be a lot more efficient and to figure out systems. And my philosophy with real estate has always been real simple. Like I want to make a list of everything I have to do and then ask myself a question: how can I do none of that? How can I get somebody else to do it all for me? So I started getting virtual assistants to do my marketing. I started getting, I had a local US based assistant that started handling more of the admin stuff. And then I started finding other investors that were already doing deals and partnering with them. So I would do the work of bringing the leads in, making the offers, and my VAs would do the follow-up and all of that back office admin stuff. But then I would find local investors in different markets do the boots on the ground type of work for me. So yeah, we spent 2.5 months in Prague, and then fast forward about 2 or 3 years, we did 3 months in an RV, and then we went back to Prague for another 3 months. And this was probably 5 or 6 years ago. But yeah, anywhere, that's what I love about this business. It's easy to scale. It's easy to do virtual. And here's the thing. If you have a simple lifestyle and you don't have a ton of debt, you don't need to be making 30, 40, 50 grand a month. You can live really, really comfortably on just 5 or 10 grand a month if you don't have much debt. And it doesn't cost a lot of money to travel around the world like people would think. It's actually pretty awesome. Now, we also homeschooled our kids, so that allowed us the freedom to travel anywhere around the world. Now, as they've gotten older with commitments and sports and activities, and now my sons are working jobs, it's gotten a lot harder for us to travel as much as we used to.
Yeah. Sounds good. What, do you have any VA tips? Like, you must have gone through a lot of VAs, or do you have a good VA resource, like a company that you use that you might be willing to throw out at us there?
Well, I've always found my best VAs on Upwork, and I've dabbled a little bit with onlinejobs.ph. I've never done well with hiring VAs through a third-party company, right? My biggest tips, because like, again, when you're looking at whatever kind of real estate you want to do, list everything that has to be done and ask yourself a real simple question. How can I do none of this? How can I get somebody else to do everything for me? So you look at, well, I can have a VA do this and this and this and this and this. Some things you have to do. Some things like one of the last things you should outsource is actually talking to sellers, the sales part, right? That should want to be the last things you outsource.
Which is interesting because most people try and outsource that.
Yeah.
I agree. Like that's the superpower skill set, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyway, so when I hire a VA, I already have an idea of what I want them to do. And then I will figure out, okay, now I call them silos. And I learned this from Rob Swanson from FreedomSoft. Simple system scale. And so I have like these silos, and I don't create the second silo until the first one's complete. And you create something really simple, and you build a system around that, and then scale it from there. So it has to be simple, build a simple system around it, and then you scale it. So I would have VAs to do these things in these silos for me. But then one of the other things was when I hired a VA, I always will hire like 2 or 3 for the same job and give them tests and keep the best one. So, and I give them real detailed step-by-step instructions of what I want them to do. For an example, it might be, all right, I want you to go to Craigslist. I want you to look for 3-bedroom homes in St. Louis, Missouri. And I want you to put the following information in a Google sheet. I want to know the beds, baths, the date it was posted, the title of the ad, and then I want you to put any phone numbers in that you can find in this. So that has these 6 columns. So I'm very detailed, like 6 columns spreadsheet. I want you to label the spreadsheet, St. Louis, Craigslist, and then your name. And then I want you to share the spreadsheet with me at this email address. And I want you to send me an email saying spreadsheet is done, and then put a smiley face in the subject line, right? And so then I give that kind of test to these 3-4 people that I hire. I'm looking for the one that does it with the most detail, exactly like I said, and who does it the fastest, right? And then the other thing is, like, I use FreedomSoft as my CRM. And so FreedomSoft has really good tutorials back there that teaches you how to do things, like to build a website. They give you websites, right? So what I will do is I'll say, all right, I want you to go watch these tutorial videos in FreedomSoft, and I want you to go build me a website that looks like this one. And I'll give them somebody else's website. And so I'm looking for that VA then that takes the initiative to go into the tutorials and watch the tutorials and learn how to do it, and then does it for me. And whoever does it the best, I'll hire. So I give my VAs tests and I hire only the best ones. And I usually I've had really good success with VAs over the years because of that. I test them. And then the other big tip I would give, and this is just as important, daily communication. You've got to talk to your VAs every single day, especially when they just start, because sometimes they're overwhelmed. You're giving them too much information. They're not getting any feedback if they're doing it the right way or the wrong way. And they're just like floundering because they aren't having any guidance. So
how are you communicating? Are you doing that on a video? Are you on like a Zoom or what?
Mm-hmm. And then after maybe a few weeks or a few months, they're getting it. They're doing the good job, right? You still need to be they need to be sending you reports every day. Maybe a checkup in the morning, check out in the evening or whatever, like, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. And then at the end of the day, this is what I did. So they need to be still sending you updates every single day of what they do. And you need to give them a scorecard. Like if they're doing marketing for you and they're sending 50 texts a day, or they're sending letters or whatever they're doing for you, you need to track that every day to make sure they're meeting their numbers. So that communication is so important, because you'll find out really quick if they're working out or not. 9 times out of 10, the problem is not that they're doing a bad job. It's that they don't know what job they're supposed to be doing. They're not getting any feedback. They're not getting any kind of correction of, well, okay, that's taking you way too long to do that. It should only take you this long. Or maybe what you told them to do doesn't work in that area. It's so you're making your expectations are unrealistic. So those are the 2 biggest tips I can give for hiring virtual assistants. Test them, give them tests, and only hire the best ones, and then communicate with them regularly.
Right there.
That is gold.
There's a mic drop right there.
I mean, that right. Yeah, exactly. That right.
How do
there
you pay
is-
them?
I usually pay them through Upwork, and I always pay really well. So it's like my VAs like working for me because I talk to them regularly, right? Now I don't talk to them anymore today. My team, I have local US-based assistants that kind of manage our virtual assistants now, because my company's gotten bigger. But they talk every day, especially now with Slack. That's helped a lot. Slack makes that communication a lot easier. But they do at least a couple times a week. Everybody gets on Zoom together.
Nice.
But I pay them really well. We pay them through Upwork usually. And, I don't remember what the rates are, but if the going rate's $5 an hour, I'm paying them $6 or $7 an hour.
Yeah.
I always want to make sure that I don't want them to leave because they might get paid better somewhere else.
Right. And you're not as worried about having a perfect English type of thing if they're overseas, because they're not talking to the sellers.
Yeah. Now, if they are, I'm going to hire somebody who does have good English. So like I've done this before. I'll hire 3 VAs that seem like they're pretty good. I hire the 3 best. And then I give them tests. I say, all right, I want you to call 5 for sale by owners and record. I want you to record the calls. And then, because you can't make them do that before you hire them, because you have to pay them to do that extra work.
Yeah.
So I make them call 10 for sale by owners, and I give them a script, and I tell them, I want you to ask all these questions and put the information into a spreadsheet or whatnot and record the calls. And so I want to listen to them. And then I hire the best one that does it. So usually you can really weed out people that maybe have bad internet connections, the poor English, or it's not as good as you're expecting it to be. You can understand the VAs that can think good, can think well on their feet, and they can ask the right questions, and they don't sound robotic as they're going through the scripts and stuff like that. But once you find a good one, pay them well, give them bonuses, and really take care of them. We need to stop thinking of our VAs as like some contractor or some third-party vendor. We need to be thinking of them more as our employees, as our family and friends, right?
Yeah.
Because they are.
That is right there. Superpower advice right there, guys, because, you can use this in any business that you're going to do. Joe's using it for his lease option business. And that was absolutely, we could probably stop the podcast right there, and that'd be good for today. A little soundbite there.
Exactly.
We're going to keep going here. That was fantastic. Thank you. What a big surprise to get that, those extra nuggets today. Right. I think Joe and we're all like, I'm over here taking notes. Yeah. What else? Excellent. Well, let's jump into lease options. So as we said, you guys, Joe is the top, or one of the top, I'd say the top, one of the top experts on lease options across the country. So this is a super, super treat for all of us today. So I'm going to kick it off by just asking the first question here, Joe, which is before we go, do we want to start with exactly what a lease option is on the basic description of that? And then maybe start with what would be the perfect scenario of who would even be interested in a lease option?
I'll give you an example. So lease option is where you lease a property with the option to buy it in the future. And it could be a couple months, it could be a couple years, it could be 20, 30 years, but you lease a property from the owner with the option to buy it in the future. It's one of my favorite strategies for doing deals because it takes away a lot of the risk and the liability. So I'm not taking over somebody's mortgage. I'm not doing owner financing. There's a place for that. But, I think it was one of the Rockefellers said the secret to success is to own nothing and control everything. So lease options allow you to control real estate without owning it, which has a lot of advantages, right? Because let's say the market gets, you go into a lease option right now and the market just nosedives and falls apart. Well, guess what? You only have an option to buy that house. You don't have to buy it. If it's worth 200 today and in 2 years it's worth 100, you don't have to buy it. You're not stuck with it. If you were to buy it with owner financing or take over the mortgage, or if you were to go get a bank loan to buy it, you're kind of stuck with it. So lease options give you a lot of freedom and flexibility to get out of a deal if it goes bad, right? Also, another big advantage to a lease option is I'm not taking over the deed. So sometimes when you take over the deed, it raises a lot of red flags. And that's one thing too, like what got me interested in lease options when I was starting was I used to do a lot of subject twos. And again, there's a place for subject twos where you buy a property subject to the existing mortgage. But it was, I had a couple bad experiences with that where an attorney from the seller, 6 months later, after they forget that I saved them from foreclosure and I put in $5,000 into the property to get their mortgage current, and then all of a sudden 12 months later, they're like, hey, I want to buy another house. And they can't because they have this mortgage still in their name. So then this happened to me once where they knock on the tenant's door because they know I'm doing a lease option so I have a tenant in there, and the seller knocks on the door of the tenant buyer and says, hey, when are you going to buy this house? And the tenant buyer says, well, who are you? Well, I own this house. And the tenant buyer says, well, I thought Joe McCall owned this house. What do you mean? What's going on here? I still have 2 years left to buy this house. What are you talking about? Well, you need to hurry up and buy it because I want to get another mortgage. And then all of a sudden these red flags start going up and they're like, what's going on? So then the tenant buyer calls me, the seller calls me and says, hey, this is fraudulent. I heard about this in the news. You're doing mortgage fraud. So I'm going to contact my attorney. So I get a call from the attorney of the seller, and then I get another call from the attorney of the tenant buyer. What are you doing? You can't do this. So legally you can. I mean, subject twos are not illegal. You can buy property subject to the existing mortgage. The problem is this. If you're looking for creative ways to buy houses, if any homeowner were to ask their attorney, should I deed my house over to this investor and let him take over my mortgage, and the mortgage stays in my name, what do you think that attorney is going to say? That attorney is going to say, no, don't do it. Well, okay, there's an alternative. It's called a lease option, where you lease a property from a seller with the option to buy it in the future. So the deed stays in the seller's name. The mortgage stays in the seller's name. All they're doing is leasing the property to me as the investor, and I have the option to buy it in the future. And then I sublease it out to another tenant buyer who lives in the house. In my opinion, it takes away a lot of the liability and risk by doing it that way. It gives me more flexibility. It gives me more options. I can do different things with it. That's kind of what a lease option is. Now, when you find a seller who maybe wants too much for their house, let me give you an example. I was thinking of this. I did a lease option deal of a seller's house. His house is worth about 95 to 100 grand in a small town of 500 people in Nebraska. And, but it had good bones. It was in good shape. It was a little 2-bedroom, 980 square foot house, really nice corner, big lot. But the seller was trying to sell it for sale by owner, and they couldn't because they were asking too much money for it. I think it was worth about 100. They were trying to sell it for 95, 100. But the problem was the guy was going to jail. He had been drinking too much. It's a real tragic story. He had drank too much driving home from the bar and hit somebody on a bike and killed him. So, and he had a wife and a couple kids, and real tragic, horrible story. Well, he's going to jail, and he has to report to the police or the jail in a couple weeks. And so his wife, he's leaving his wife and their 1 or 2 kids. She wants to leave and go live with her parents to help take care of the kids and stuff. So he can't sell this house. He doesn't have enough equity to pay a realtor the commissions. So we come to him and say, hey, listen, maybe we can get you the price that you want, a little less, but still you'll walk away with more money than you would if you sold with a realtor. We can get you close to what you want if you let us lease it for the next 5 years, and we'll give you enough money from the lease to pay the mortgage. And we'll take care of all the normal day-to-day maintenance and repairs. And he said, okay, he didn't have a choice, really. Now, obviously, the best thing for him and his wife would be to just sell it and be done with it. but they would have had to bring money to closing, and they wouldn't have been able to sell it without having to pay a bunch of money for commissions and all of that stuff. So anyway, what we did is we did give them like $1,500 so they could move. And that was enough to get them money to move. Normally you don't have to give a seller any money up front. So, but we gave them $1,500 and we agreed to lease the house from them for, I think it was $734 a month. And that was enough to cover their mortgage, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, $734 a month. And then we turned around. So they moved out. We put a sign in the yard, rent to own or something like that. We found a lady within like one day who was going through a situation like a divorce. She had bad credit. It wasn't her fault, but just because of the divorce. And we were advertising it, I think, for $995 a month in rent. It's almost $1,000. So our cash flow was, I don't remember the numbers, about $260 a month was our cash flow. Actually, take that back. Our cash flow was $324 a month. I sold this deal to a local investor there. So our cash flow was $324 a month. And so we had an option to buy it from the seller for about $89,000. And we were selling it for $105,000 to this tenant buyer who's living in it. A divorced single mom with credit. She's like, I call her penalty box buyer. She needs a year or two to fix her credit so she can get a mortgage. So if you look at, there's 3 profit centers in a lease option. There's cash now, cash flow, and cash later. So the cash now, we collected, I think, $4 or $5 grand from that tenant buyer up front, and we paid the seller $1,500. So we made cash now about $3,500. And then we made about $300 something in cash flow. And then at the end, when we sell it for $105 and we are buying it for $85, $95, $85, what's that spread? 30 grand, right? About 30 grand, something like that. I'm so bad at math. No, it's 20 grand. So back end profit was 20 grand, $300 a month in cash flow every month. And plus we made a little bit. Now you credit some of that money back and whatnot. But anyway, just that one deal, we're going to make about $30,000 profit on that one deal, really not using any of our own money. We did pay the seller $1,500, but we collected $5,000 from that tenant buyer when they moved in. And so it's a great win-win-win for everybody involved, right? And I only do lease options where everybody wins. So the seller wins because we were able to lease their property while the husband's in jail and the wife was able to get her stuff out and go to her parents. And we're taking care of the maintenance and repairs, the daily regular maintenance and repairs. And they're getting their mortgage paid. They're getting their mortgage covered. And then we put a tenant buyer in who wants to buy a house but can't. They want to be in that small town, but they just don't have good credit yet because they went through a divorce. She loves the house. She's taking care of the maintenance and repairs. She's taking care of it because she was going to buy it someday. So she's got more of a homeowner's mentality than a normal tenant would. And then we're selling it at a fair price. In, I think, 3 years was our agreement with the tenant buyer. We're selling it for $105. It'll be worth about $105, $110. So it's a good fair price. And so everybody wins. And then we win as the investor because we're staying in the middle of this thing. We're getting cash now, about $3 grand up front. We're getting about $300 a month cash flow every month for about 3 years. And then we're going to make about a $20,000 profit at the back end. So it's just a great way to do lease options that I think, especially now as we're coming into this market where you're seeing days on market go up, you're starting to see price drops, a lot of price drops. Sellers are getting nervous, are getting scared. And, you know, you go in as a normal investor and you're offering 70 cents on the dollar. They're just going to be like, I would like to, I wish I mean, they're not, no one's going to say, I wish I could sell it that cheap, but they're like, I can't, I don't have that much equity, or I don't want to, but they're worried about making a second mortgage payment. They've already bought another house. They want to they want to downsize and move to Florida. They can't sell their house for what they thought they could. They weren't expecting it to sit on the market for 3 or 4 months. And it's already been 2 or 3 months. I mean, it used to be that you could sell these houses really, really quickly. Now we're coming into a normal market, but like it's still 3 to 4 months was not what they were expecting. And they keep on dropping their price and they're not getting the showings that they thought they would. And so when we come to them and say, hey, we can buy your house for cash at this, which you know they're going to say no to, or we can buy it for this at a higher price if you let me lease it from you for a few years first. So now as investors, we can give the sellers options. You can give the sellers more options and you will do more deals that way. So instead of getting maybe 1 out of every 30 offers accepted, you could get 3 out of 30 offers accepted because you're giving sellers options. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. Hey guys, it's Julie here with a quick break from the show to discuss an opportunity some of you may have interest in, which is to work more closely with me. On almost a daily basis, I get calls from investors and brokers, both new and experienced, asking me for guidance or advice. I love helping you guys out, and it keeps me on my toes too. So with that said, I wanted to let you know that I have a private broker coaching community called the VIP Education Community. And the best part is that it's 100% free. That's right, it's free to join. So whether you're a traditional broker or a broker investor, my VIP education community offers personalized one-on-one coaching from not just me, but also from my experienced broker friends with expertise in all disciplines of real estate and real estate investing. We'll teach and share our modern marketing strategies, our tech and lead generation resources, plus teach you how to identify or offer up opportunities for yourself or for your clients using techniques such as seller financing, lease options, land entitlement deals, BRRRR investing, flipping, multifamily or commercial coaching, whatever you like. We've got it all covered for you. The future of real estate is changing fast, and to stay in the game, it's time to learn about all the options you can offer your buyer and seller clients, as well as, if you want, learn how to use those skills to grow your own real estate portfolio. If you'd like more details about joining my VIP education community, reach out to me at julie@seattleinvestorsclub.com or text me at 206-910-2985 or just send me a Facebook message. My new favorite phrase is community equals confidence. So let's navigate the future of real estate together. Now, back to the show. So on that particular deal, the ways that you made money is that you had an underlying deal with that seller, right? That was your deal. And you established a rent payment with them and you established a purchase price with them.
Yeah.
And then you turn around and went and found what we call a tenant buyer.
Yes.
Right. And to give that tenant buyer the right to even get that deal with those terms, they pay you an option fee. Yeah. Right. And so you collected, we'll say, I don't know what the number was.
About $4,000 from them.
$4,000 from your tenant buyer, that third party, of which you were able to turn around. And that's how you got the money to pay $1,500 to the seller. It came from your tenant buyer.
Yeah.
And because you're charging your tenant buyer a higher rent than the rent that you've agreed to with the underlying seller, that's your monthly spread, right? And now you've also got a purchase and sale agreement price set up with your tenant buyer that is higher than your purchase and sale agreement price with the underlying seller. So you make that spread when they go and exercise their option later, right?
Yes.
There's all kinds of reasons why, like you said, why people might want to do that. I mean, I have one right now that the person, it could be even an interest rate thing right now, right? If that seller doesn't need the money and, you can get a runway with a tenant lease option to see if interest rates come down, right? There's so many ways to use this, guys. Yeah. That's kind of the standard thing right there. Let's go back to talking about how you can make money. That's how you can make all three types of money: money now, cash flow, and money later, right? Yeah. But what if you don't want to go all the way through the deal and you just want big money now? Can you tee up this type of thing and wholesale it? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Well, that's how I got started doing lease options. I didn't invent the strategy. A lot of people were doing it. One of our mentors, Claude Diamond, I think is going to be at this workshop, right?
Yes.
He was doing the strategy for years before I did. And I think, what does he call it, Mariska? Arbitrage or?
Yes. He loves to use the word arbitrage, which is basically making a spread between two different cash flows or two different amounts of money. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, basically I tie up a property, quote unquote, with the seller. And if there's not enough equity in the deal or not enough cash flow, I don't want to stay in the middle of that. So I do it as like A to B to C. So let's say I'm the investor, I'm the A, the seller is B, and the end tenant buyer is C. So A to B to C. So I will enter into a contract with the seller. That's the A to B contract to lease it with maybe $10 down, $100 down.
Is there a rule, Joe, on a minimum? Is there a legality thing there on option fee?
I don't know. You need to put some kind of consideration for a contract to be valid. So it could be $10, $100. If someone tells you, no, that's against the law, or the law says it has to, there is no law that I've ever heard of that says consideration has to be a certain dollar amount. If there is, I'd love to see it, but I've never seen it before. So yeah, $10, $100. So I give the seller a lease option agreement where I am the tenant buyer. So it's an A to B agreement, A to B. Then I find a tenant buyer that wants to lease option the property. And then I will sell or assign my contract to them. So to the tenant buyer. And I'll sell my contract to them, and then they just take my place. So I'll sell it for $5,000.
You're talking about, when you use the word sell, you're talking about the word, maybe you're talking about assignment, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I will assign my interest in that contract to the tenant buyer, and then I'm done and out of the deal. And it becomes now an agreement between A and C. It becomes an agreement between the seller and the new tenant buyer.
So a little key points that I want to point out there is that number one is that you are finding that tenant buyer as part of your value add to the process here.
Yeah.
So everything's a done deal by the time you're assigning it, because everything's already in place.
Yeah. And so there's a couple of questions people are asking, I'm sure, is like, well, don't you need a real estate license to do that? Here's my answer to that. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. I still try to use I am licensed myself, but I do these deals as an investor. I always disclose that I'm an agent, but I always have I always try when I can to hire a realtor for me, because I don't want to be the one advertising the home and taking all the calls and showing the property. So why not outsource that to a realtor? Just hire a realtor to find your tenants for you, and that solves that problem. The other thing is people ask is like, well, what if, does the seller get to approve who you put into that house? Well, the way I do it is yes, because when I do my assignment agreement, I have all three parties sign the assignment agreement.
Okay,
So
that's a major nugget.
Yeah, so the seller will sign that assignment agreement. They know that I'm assigning, and they know from the very beginning this is what I'm doing. And so when I present my offer, I will give the seller two different lease option offers. I'll give them an offer where I want to stay in the middle, so there's some equity and there's some cash flow. But if they say no to that, then I'll give them a higher price and a higher rent. And I let them know that I'm going to find a tenant buyer, and I'm going to sell or assign my contract to them, and I'm going to be done and out of the picture.
And they're like, sure, just take care of it for me, whatever. If you can get me that number, I don't care.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. They don't. And so everything is totally above board. I disclose everything. I let that seller know, hey, I'm not going to be staying in the middle of this deal. I'm going to be selling my interest to somebody else. You get to sign the assignment paperwork. So you're going to know who I assign it to. The tenant buyer is going to know what I'm doing. And so everything is above board. I hire an agent, sometimes, not all the times, but I'll hire a realtor to find me the tenant, and I'll usually pay the realtor $1,000 to find the tenant for me or something like that. So you can make, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 assignment fees by doing that. I think the lowest would be about $3,000. You can get $7,000, $10,000. I know in Seattle, some of the first students I ever coached, I forget their names right now,
Larry,
they were making $10,000 assignment fees at a minimum. They're making minimum $10,000 assignment fees.
So I want to back it up even a little bit more. So the scenario we're talking about is assigning a lease option. And the reason why you want to assign it in this case is because that particular property doesn't have enough equity for you, or cash flow, that cash flow middle part, and that equity where you can sell it for more at the end. So you're identifying that before you get started. And you're like, okay, this deal doesn't have those other two components that I want to stay in the middle. We call it a sandwich lease option. Yeah. And therefore, that is when you're like, I'm going to wholesale this one. But before you give up and wholesale it, you make an offer to that seller that puts enough equity and cash flow on there, and let them say no. Maybe they'll say yes, and then you got a deal that you want to stay in. But if they say no, you just go to plan B and you say, you know what? I understand that I'm with you there, that I want to get you that more money too. Here's plan B. I'm going to tee it up like this for you. How does that sound? They say, Sounds great to me, Joe. Thank you so much. I just don't want to be bothered anymore. You've brought great value to me. You didn't just walk away after they said no to your equity deal. You continued to bring value to them with another solution and option. And now therefore you built rapport and they like you and trust you and need you, right?
You've explained it really, really well, Julie. Because here's the bottom line is the seller has to be motivated. They've got to be some motivating factor. And I always tell sellers whenever I'm talking to them, why don't you just list it with an agent, right? I see Mariska smiling. I learned that from our Claude Diamond, of course, right? Why don't you, this sounds like a nice house. Why would you even want to sell it?
Why don't you just clod them? Why don't you just clod them? That's our term for the Claude Diamond stuff.
Yeah. Like, why don't you, what sounds like a nice house? Why would you even want to sell it?
Yeah. Why don't you just
stay? For you. Right. This probably wouldn't work for you. So I'll ask a seller, what's more important to you? To sell it quickly or to sell it for the highest price possible? Because you can't do both. And if they say, well, I got plenty of time, right? I'm just going to sit on it until I do sell it. I'm not in a hurry. I'm not going to give it away. So their motivation on a 1 to 10 is like 0. So I'm not going to push it. I might still send them an offer in the mail and I'm still going to follow up with them every 30 days, but like their motivation's not there. If they are maybe a 5 to a 7, so they're kind of warm, I'll say, after I say, why don't you just list it with an agent? I might send them an offer with 3 different options. I might send them a cash offer, a wholesaling lease option offer, or sandwich lease option offer where I stay in the middle, or a wholesaling lease option offer. And each of those 3 offers, the price gets higher. So I give the seller choices. Right. If they're really motivated, I'm just going to send them one offer for what I know would be best for their scenario, their situation. And, I also ask them things like, well, I'm sure you got lots of time, right, to sell this property. You've got at least 3 to 6 months runway, right? Like you're not in a hurry to sell this thing, right? I'm going to ask them, what are you going to do when you sell the property? What are you going to do with the money? I'm also going to ask them questions like, what are you going to do, Mr. Seller, if you can't sell this property in 6 months? What are you going to do? Are you going to rent it out? And if they say, yeah, that's a perfect lease option candidate, right? Because they're like, they want to sell it, but if they only have a few months and if they don't, they're going to rent it. So then I might ask them questions like, well, are you prepared to manage the property and take care of the maintenance and repairs? What if I could take care of all of that for you? What if I could give you the price that you want? If you just let me lease it from you for a couple of years, that wouldn't work, would it? So it's just all about asking questions, trying to figure out their reason for selling. Do they need to sell or do they want to sell? And I always pull away. It's like, I'm not chasing them. I'm not trying to sell them into anything. And sometimes you just need to give sellers time to cook, right? So let them think about it. Follow up with them next day, a couple days, a week later, a month later. You're going to find, especially with lease options, because every seller wants to sell their house, right? Every seller, if you were to ask them, you want to sell it now or later? They're going to say now. You want to sell it for full price or lower? Full price. You want to close in 1 week or 4 weeks? 1 week. Like, of course. So sometimes you need to give sellers time to cook. And so you just were nice, send them an offer, something in the mail, follow up again every 30 days, because 85% of your deals are going to come from the follow-up. That's so important for everybody to understand. So you've got to be in it for the long haul and follow up.
And I can say from experience, because this is the essence of my VIP education community for brokers. You can do this as a broker too. And the one thing I'll add on there, a good little question also, if you're an agent, that you just say the whole thing about, well, what's your plan B? And like clod them with the kind of reverse, like, you don't really need to do this now, or, that kind of thing. I always say, because I don't want to ask, are you going to list it for sale or anything like that? Because that's, another option maybe, right? I always say like, so you have what's your plan B if the cash offer or lease option or whatever scenario doesn't work out for you? Do you just have a friend or family member, or maybe your brother's an agent, you're going to list it with them? And I don't, they just reveal, like lots of times they say, oh, I'll just cross that bridge when it happens. And then I know I'm in, right? If they say, yeah, my sister's an agent, then I know I'm not going to go that route with it, right? And it's just another kind of reverse engineered question, as we call it. We clod them with the questions. You guys will come to the Investor Summit in Coeur d'Alene and you'll learn what that means. But this is you. You're like my brother from another mother.
Joe said something really, really important though about follow-up, because I tell you what, we've had a lot of deals that I know we lost because we didn't follow up. But I mean, we've had deals that have come to us 18 months after our initial conversation with the seller.
Yeah.
They just weren't ready at the time, and they didn't like the options that were, presented to them at the time. And then 18 months later, they actually come back to us and say, yeah, let's talk about that again. Because their situation, like Joe has said, they've cooked a little bit, their pain has increased.
Let me ask you guys a question while we're a little mastermind here with the smart people. On a lease option, let's say an investor leased it with the option to buy, right? Can that investor or maybe or just a regular old homeowner? So I've got a house, I'm listing it this week, and it's kind of ripe for this sort of thing. If they don't get the price they want, they don't have a lot of pressure on them. I was thinking, maybe there's a lease option opportunity here where some buyer leases it with the option to buy, and during that time, the seller grants and allows that buyer to do repairs to the house or make improvements to the house during the time they're on the lease. Now, this person is a tenant buyer, so their intention is to buy the house, but that raises the value of the house during the time that they're on the lease. So when they go to exercise their option to buy, right?
And they force the appreciation.
They've got, I don't know, they can refinance. I don't know what the details are. Can you get your cash out, or you put you're putting a 80% loan on there or 75% loan, and you've owned it for 6 months. No, you haven't owned it because you're on the lease. So I don't know. You see what I'm trying to do there, Joe?
Well,
does that work?
Go ahead, Mariska.
I was just going to say it kind of depends on the loan, on the type of loan that they want to get. But I've been told by more than one loan officer that if somebody leases the house with an option to buy for 12 months, that a lot of lenders will look at that as kind of a refinance, if you will, rather than a purchase. So they may be able to forgo a lot of the down payment requirements and things like that. So
it's important before you start doing lease options, you find a good local mortgage broker to work with, because you want your tenant buyers to be working with a local mortgage broker that can help them fix their credit, who knows those programs that will consider it more of a refinance, which makes it easier to qualify for.
Yes.
And you also want to work with somebody that understands lease options and working with investors, because, sometimes it's challenging to get that original option deposit money applied towards their down payment.
True.
But if you work with the right mortgage broker who knows the right banks and knows the right way to present it to the banks, that makes all the difference in the world. So
absolutely,
I would make sure you have a good local mortgage broker that is okay with working with credit challenged buyers, can help them fix their credit. This is another important thing that kind of relates to this, is you never want to put a tenant buyer in a house that has no realistic chance of buying it in 1 or 2 years.
Right.
They maybe have a $50,000 in federal taxes owed, or unpaid child support and alimony, or they just have a lot of recent stuff that's going to take at least 3 to 5 years to take care of. Maybe you only want to put tenant buyers in a home that you're setting up to win. They have a realistic chance of getting a good mortgage in 1 or 2 years. Yep. So a good mortgage broker will tell you how to do that. And then when it comes to handyman specials, I've done lots of those where property needed a lot of work and I didn't want to do the work. So I would enter into a contract with the seller to give them a higher price than they would from a cash investor. And then I will turn around and sell that lease option as a handyman special to a tenant buyer. And you can do it a couple different ways. What I just do to keep it simple is I just make sure the price is lower. I don't do work for equity credits. I just make the price lower and the rent lower. And you'll be shocked how many tenant buyers will be calling you on those properties that need a lot of work, because they're self-employed, they're contractors. Something happened where they maybe had a failed business 2 years ago that has affected their credit, but they make good money. They just don't have 2 years yet of reported income tax returns to get them a good loan. So they would love to be able to fix up a house on their own, get a good deal on it, lease it for a couple of years while they get those tax returns that they need so that they can get a good mortgage. So it's important to be working with a good mortgage broker that kind of understands this stuff. Does that make sense?
Heck yeah, because the question that I want to know, that one piece at the end, who I think we can ask our friend Osama, who came on Thursdays with us, is how much, how does that loan work at the end? If they bought it and they put $40,000, we're in Seattle, so that's not a lot of money to us over here, $40,000 into this house, and now they have walk-in equity when they go to put their loan on and exercise their option to buy, can they recover all those funds and maybe even get cash out, right?
That's a good question.
That is like such a home run right there. Like,
yeah. I'd be
you-
really cautious about getting too excited about that yet, though, because in general, like if you think about it, if you just bought a rental house and you were going to be putting money into it, it's a lot easier to get reimbursed if you're hiring people to do certain jobs than if you were to buy the materials and do the work yourself. So it's really kind of hard to get paid on that. So
you know what somebody's going to say? They're going to say, put the work that you've done during the lease term as a cloud on the title, as a interest on the title. So when it goes to refinance, it gets paid
like
off.
Mechanics lead or something like that.
That's what they're going to say.
Yeah. Well, here's an easy way to solve all of that is just mark the price down. So
I agree with Joe. Just keep it simple.
Yeah. If the house is worth 300 fixed up and it needs $50,000 in work, set the option price at 250. That solves all of that.
That solves all of that, because once they've done the work, now the value's there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I like your style. This is all very exciting. Yeah. I'm working on one right now myself. That's interesting is that it's a pretty property. Like Joe says, he likes to buy pretty properties, and the seller wants to move out of state, or she's moving out of state because she's getting married. She's getting married in 12 months. So currently the rent on the property is equivalent to her mortgage payment. Okay. And she only, the price, there's some flux there. She doesn't want to relist it for sale because her friend listed it and it didn't sell. So she doesn't want to hurt his feelings by putting it back. I'm like, why don't you just put it back on the market at the right price? She doesn't want to do that for whatever reason, but she's basically got it now on Airbnb because she's not living there. And the Airbnb rent is much higher than she just wants her mortgage payment, and she's happy to get her proceeds in 12 months when she needs it for her wedding, right? Literally somebody could get in there at paying off her mortgage and potentially even rent it on Airbnb and collect this arbitrage themselves and then exercise the option to buy, 12 months down the road or whatever.
Well, if you're an investor who can do Airbnbs or short-term rentals, lease options are a great way to control property and then turn around and do an Airbnb on it. And if prices, let's say they just continue to go up. Now in 5 years, you've been making great cash flow on this deal. You don't want to lose it. There's a lot of equity in it. Well, guess what? You could buy it, or you could turn around and sell it on the MLS and make that big spread. So it gives you a lot more options. Or if values drop and all of a sudden that house that was worth 500 is now worth 400 in 5 years, well, you can just walk away.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So let me look at what I'm saying. So we got wholesaling lease options, which is there's not enough equity. So you just want to tee it all up for somebody and pass it on. Then we have the term that you use is what? Sandwich lease option. Mm-hmm. And that's when you stay in the middle, right, guys? Right. That's when the beautiful part is if the seller says, but I'm talking Seattle, I need $5,000 of moving money, or I need whatever. You're like, fine, because you can get that as your option fee from the tenant buyer. You don't have to worry like on wholesaling. On wholesaling, you need, let's say somebody needs to put down $2,500 as an earnest money or something like that, and you're worried about how you're going to get that money. You have nowhere to get the money from. It's got to come out of your pocket, right? Exactly. But with lease options, you're getting it from your tenant buyer. Here's the other thing, Joe. Let's say you're going to do sandwich lease option and you're going to stay in the middle. Okay. One of the things that when I first got started, and I always talk to Mariska about, is I'm nervous that I got to commit to that lease payment as soon as I've made that lease with the underlying seller. So I made the deal with A to B with the seller. I agreed to a lease and a purchase price, lease amount and purchase price with the seller, and an option fee, whether it's $10 or $5,000, whatever it is. And now I'm committed to that, but I got to go find a tenant buyer to like make the deal work for me. How do I talk to the seller about that I don't want to start that process until I find that tenant buyer? That means I'm disclosing to you what I'm doing, which is kind of opposite than wholesaling, where you're trying to sneak around, right? How do you work it from the beginning to give yourself the time to get that tenant buyer?
A couple things. Number one, the first thing I thought about is in my lease option contract with the sellers, I can get out of any lease option contract with a 90-day advance notice. So even though I have it under 5 years, if I give them a 90-day notice, I think is what I do. I might do 60 days, but I can get out with an advance notice. That's number one. But number two, sometimes my lease option doesn't start. It says on there, it will not start until I find a tenant buyer, a satisfactory tenant buyer to live in the house. Having said that, sometimes I set it up where I don't tie up the property or lock it up. So I use a flex option. If the seller sells it before I find a tenant buyer, no harm, no foul, cancel my contract. You don't owe me anything. No big deal. So that gives the seller the flexibility of like continuing to advertise on their own. Because if they sell it, I don't want to be, and if it's been 3 months and I've not found a tenant buyer for it yet, I don't want to be accused of taking it off the market and harming the seller, right? So I make my initial agreement with the seller flexible. So they can cancel it at any time until I find a tenant buyer. Now, when I find a tenant buyer, then I'm going to start making the payments at that point. Now, having said that too, if it's a really good smoking hot deal in a good neighborhood and I got good cash flow, I know I can find a tenant. At least, let's say I can't find a tenant buyer, at least I can find a normal regular tenant, right? Then I'm going to start making payments right away on that. So if it's, today's the 26th, I don't know if I would start making payments August 1, but I would start making payments September 1, right? So, and then I'm going to lock that deal up. As soon as I get it under an option contract, I'm going to record my memorandum of option in the county records because I want to cloud the title. So that's a deal that I want to control because it's such a good deal. But if it's like a marginal deal, like I don't know, well then, I might say my first payment will be in 3 months or when I find a tenant buyer to live in the house.
And so if you're saying my first payment's in 3 months, that's where you're on the flex, where they can cancel you at any time, right? Because you're going to be talking are the majority of the houses you're doing this on, Joe, vacant or some occupied?
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are, they've already moved out. They already live in another house. And which is
creating the sense of urgency a little bit that they want to get going on, right? Because I can see, the scenario where the landlord, let's say, says, well, I don't want to sit on my house here and wait for you for 60 days, right, to find a tenant because I want to put a tenant in there now, right? And your flex option is, well, go ahead. If you beat me to it, we'll cancel. Are you actually... Well, on the flex option, are you signing anything with them or is it more like a LOI type of thing? Like this is how it works.
I give them a contract that says you can cancel it. I'm trying to remember the language.
But you guys sign a contract. It just has cancellation language in it.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I don't want to lock up a property if I don't know for sure that I'm going to want to buy it. Right.
And the beautiful thing about the flex thing where they can cancel, nobody's living there. So nobody has to force a tenant out. There's no eviction-y thing to worry about. It's still vacant, right? Yeah. So there's no worry on canceling that contract on the flex option.
Well, that's another thing too. If there is a tenant already in the house, I'll just tell the seller, listen, let me know when they're out because I don't want to get involved with that. So I let the seller take care of that. As soon as the tenant's out, let me know and we'll start the lease option process at that point. But I still give the seller, I say, look, I'll buy it now with the tenant as is. And here is a cash offer. I'll buy it from you at 70 cents on the dollar with the tenant. I'll take care of the tenant and evict them and all that, but that's going to be in my price, right? So I like giving the sellers those kinds of options.
Right, right.
As often as I can.
Right. I mean, if let's say there was a tenant in the house and you're working out the lease option situation, but you don't want to mess with it until that tenant's out of there. If that tenant, lots of times people might know, okay, my tenant finally gave notice or they know they're moving out. They're going to move out in 30 days. Would you start at that point? Would you start anything at that point to try and find the tenant buyer? Do you ever advertise for a tenant buyer before you're actually?
No, I don't, because if I start advertising, the new tenant buyers are going to want to see the house.
Right.
I'm going to have to tell them now, you're going to have to wait. And then it's hard to get pictures. The house is a mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you want to try to get the house at least cleaned, before you start advertising it.
And let's talk about maintenance for a second, because we're running long here because it's so awesome. And then we have some really cool stuff to tell you guys on how you can continue on here with the conversation. But on maintenance, let's talk about maintenance, because that is a major, that's a carrot that can be dangled, incentivize these homeowners, these landlords even further to want to sign up and do these deals with you. So how do you handle the maintenance on these types of lease options?
I have a $500 cap. So I tell the seller, we'll cover all the day-to-day maintenance and repairs under $500. And then anything above that, you're going to have to take care of. So if the air conditioner goes out, now you could get like an extended home warranty thing for them if you wanted. Sometimes I'll go ahead and buy that for the seller. It's only a few $100, right?
Right.
So I tell the seller, I'll be responsible for any of the maintenance and repairs under $500. Anything above that, you'll have to fix. And then I also put in my contract, if I do fix it, let's say the AC goes out, it costs $2,000 to fix. Well, obviously, if there's a tenant buyer in that house, you have to take care of that thing. And if the seller won't pay for it, you need to be in a position where you do pay for it yourself. But I tell the seller, if you don't pay for any repairs and I have to pay for them, you will give me a credit of twice that amount when I exercise my option to buy it. So if it costs me $2,000 to fix the AC, when I buy that house, the seller's going to give me a $4,000 credit to buy it off the price of the home, right? But otherwise, I'm responsible for anything under $500. So guess what? I pass that on to the tenant buyer. The tenant buyer is responsible for any repairs under $500.
You're making your A to B contract with the seller that you'll pay for anything under $500. And if you spend any big dollars on capital improvement type stuff, you're going to get a double credit towards your purchase price on the back end. Then you're like, oh man, now you're going to, and then you pass on then you go to the tenant buyer and you're passing on that anything under $500 to them. So you're out net zero.
Exactly. But you got to remember, most tenant buyers, when they come into these homes, they have more of a homeowner's mentality.
Yeah.
And they want to take care of that home. They want to buy it. And it's very rare to get any calls for maintenance and repairs. One of my houses, I leased to the same tenant buyer for 9 years. I never got one call to fix anything. They didn't buy it. They went through divorce. Sad. I got the house back in better shape 9 years later than it was when I gave it, lease optioned it to them. Right. But not every story is like that. I've had bad lease option experiences before, right? But
any type of deal can be bad, you know what I mean?
But have you ever had a rental house, just a straight rental house, where they've said, hey, I'm going to put in a French drain, or I'm going to put in new stainless steel appliances, or I'm going to landscape the front yard. Does that ever happen? I mean, those happen with lease option houses.
Yeah, that happens. And here, I wanted to point out one other thing, guys, is if you're like, okay, this seller, the underlying seller, the reason they kind of are even motivated to do this lease option is they don't have a lot of money or they don't want to spend any money. But geez, it does look like the roof is going to need a repair or the whatever is going to need a repair. And you're like, I don't want to pay for that because I'm trying to get started on doing this, above board, better than wholesaling, better houses and whatever. But guess how you're going to get the money for that? It's called the option fee. And then you're going to sit on that option fee as your reserve for when these things come up, guys. So again, you're just,
that's really important because a lot of investors will spend that option deposit money. So you need to set that aside and save it for unknown things, for emergencies. Let's say something happens, the AC breaks and the owner won't fix it. You have to fix it. Well, you got the money there in reserves. Let's say the tenant buyer, sometimes this happens, they don't pay rent that month.
Yes.
Well, guess what? You have to pay that rent still. And by the way, I don't send that rent to the seller. I send the rent to the mortgage. I pay the underlying mortgage myself. If there's anything left over, then I send that to the seller. But so like if the tenant buyer doesn't
let's back up. Let's point that out real beep, beep, honk, honk. So you are not making the lease option payment is not being made to the seller directly. You're using a servicing company.
Yeah.
So the tenant buyer pays it there. Then the servicing company pays the underlying seller their lease that you owe, and then they send you the difference. Is that right?
Well, yeah. The escrow, the third party company will collect the rent from the tenant buyer, take that money, pay the mortgage, and send any difference then to me.
Okay, right. Because you are only making your payment to the seller in the amount of their mortgage payment. I think there could be a scenario where they're collecting more than their mortgage payment, right?
So then the third party servicing company will send the seller a little bit of money, will send me a little bit of money,
right,
to pay the mortgage. So you just want to avoid the situation where the seller is paying for that mortgage, because there may be one rare situation where I will let the seller pay the mortgage payment, but I want to see, like I've had sellers give me online access to their bank account before, so I can log into their mortgage account to see that the mortgage has been paid, or I can get statements mailed to me every month to make sure it's been paid. So it's really important though that you as the investor in the middle makes that mortgage payment, make sure that mortgage payment gets paid every month.
Yeah. And then the other little technical legally nut thing there is recording this memorandum.
Sure.
Right. And what do you call that on your end?
A memorandum of option.
Memorandum of option is going to be recorded at the title company to cloud the title, so nobody can like sell the property out from under you when you're you have these agreements in place.
Well, it also prevents the seller from taking out another line of credit or mortgage on the property because there's some kind of clouding the title.
Hey, Joe, couldn't you list a lease option on the MLS?
I've never have, but I have students that have. And
you and I both interviewed, because I'm one of your super fans. Sorry, I stalk you from behind. We both interviewed Corey Geary on Novation.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden after that, I was like, you could list a lease option on the MLS, right? Okay. We're going to figure out how to do that. But
well, I had a student, I forget her name, but she was in Jacksonville, Florida. And she would get a property under a lease option with the seller. And then she would turn around and advertise it on the MLS as a lease option she would set up an auction for bidding the down payment. So she would do an open house. She'd put it on the MLS for lease option, do an open house on a Saturday for 2 hours and get everybody there who was interested in lease optioning that house. And then she would have them bid on the down payment. And normally you'd get $5,000 to $10,000. She was getting $20,000 to $30,000 down payment because she was building this frenzy of tenant buyers for these houses. Now, I asked her, how did you find the realtor willing to do that? Because not every realtor is willing to do that. And
I'm right here, guys. Yeah.
There you go. Go to your local real estate clubs, right? She was using a discount broker. She found a discount broker for $500. That realtor wasn't doing any work, was just putting it on the MLS. But there's a lot of realtors at local real estate clubs that can help you with this.
Remember what Corey Geary said. He said that they started Novations using these discount brokers and found that was disastrous. So you really want to be using somebody that knows what they're doing, understands it themselves, guys, because that's complicated to explain to everybody.
Yeah.
We'll leave that all for another time. VIP education community, that for brokers. That's all I'm talking about. This is the things that we do, guys. These are the things we talk about and teach.
That's awesome.
I could go on forever, and thank God I'm going to get to see you again. What else can we talk about? I don't know. Maybe we need to do part 2 on another day, because it's already we've been going long here. Let's just do it like this. Let's wrap it up today. Is there anything you want to add on here at the end, Joe.
When's this event? I'm going to be in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
That's our surprise. Surprise! Surprise, everybody. You guys, not only are we going to tell you right now how you can plug in with Joe to learn more details about how to get lease options done and get coached from Joe, to even do deals with Joe. We're going to tell you that in a minute too. He's got a book, our books. He's got all this stuff. But surprise, not surprise, Mariska, you tell everybody.
Yeah, so we're really excited. Not only are we having a real estate investor event in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, October 21st and 22nd, but two of the speakers are here with us today, Julie Clark and the one and only Joe McCall. Woo. So there's going to be and we've got such a great lineup of just really awesome speakers, and
such as Claude Diamond,
including Claude Diamond.
Diamond. And you guys have all heard me praise up and down one of my favorite people on the planet, Mr. Jeff Watson, will be there.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, can you believe it, Joe? We got Jeff Watson, Claude Diamond, Joe McCall. I mean, that's Jennifer Beatles, Mariska, and Larry. Everybody wear your Hawaiian shirt. That's what I'm saying.
No.
Come on.
No. Funny story. We were in, I went with Claude Diamond and Larry Mariska to Hawaii for a little workshop. And so I bought a Hawaiian shirt. My daughter just learning how to talk. She was like 2 years old, maybe. I get the Amazon package of this shirt. And I pull it out. I'm all excited about it. And she has this weird look, like an ugly look on her face. And she said, is that the only color they had? Barely could talk. And she's like, couldn't believe I would buy such an ugly shirt.
She was a fashionista from the get-go.
Yes.
Oh, that's hilarious. Look at that. You got a Hawaiian picture in the background there, Mariska. But you guys, if you guys have not yet heard or signed up for the Coeur d'Alene Investors Summit coming up October 21st and 22nd, with a little maybe hangout on the 23rd for all you cool peeps that want to talk a little extra shop. We'll see. I don't know. That's what my goal is. Let's do it. Meet us there. Joe's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Mariska's going to be there. Joe Bauer might even be there. He'd be up in the mountains. You could go bike riding with him. We don't know. You'll have to find him on a bike or a snowboard or something. But Jennifer Beatles is going to be there. Ryan Gibson is going to be there. And Joe's going to drop the details of that down in the link below. Do not wait, because I don't know. We might run out of space. That's what my concern is, because this is like the best lineup on the planet for me. I've been doing this a long time, right? And I don't go to that many events anymore. I guess I'm going to this one because I'm going to be on the panel there, but can't wait, guys, to yuck it up. And you're going to get to know all these superpower skills, as I like to call it, modern real estate. We're going to teach you how to speak modern real estate. And if you're a real estate broker, I broker lease options, right? Is the time to do that. We didn't even talk about that.
That's a whole other topic. That's a huge opportunity right there.
Huge opportunity. Jennifer Beatles had me on her summit last year where I taught everybody how to broker lease options. Come hang out with us. Come, if you want to know how to do that right now, then come to me on a Thursday from 11:30 to 12:30 at our weekly meetup at Seattle Investors Club. Just go to meetup.com, Seattle Investors Club, grab the free link, or you can call me 206-910-2985. Let's talk. Show up on Thursdays. Let's do this, guys. Now is the time. Do not delay, or you're going to miss all the good deals, and all the smart people are going to learn this ahead of you, and they're going to beat you to it, right? You guys, it is so, market change, game on, guys. Yeah. New world we're living in right now. Joe, how can everybody get a hold of you, plug into your stuff starting today?
Well, I have a book that they can get for free, WLObook.com. It's about wholesaling lease options, WLObook.com. You pay shipping and handling, but we'll send this out to you for free. And it's a book you can read in a couple hours. You can actually buy this on Amazon. Last I saw, because I don't sell it on Amazon, it's like $60. So, because it's only used copies that you could buy on Amazon, but you can get it for free. Just pay shipping and handling. This book,
and then bring your book to Coeur d'Alene and have Joe sign it. And you can sell it on Amazon later for like $1,000, guys.
Well,
Let's go.
But you can go to WLObook.com, WLO book. And it's just a cool story of how I got started doing this. I go through step by step all of the steps to do a lease option wholesaling deal. It's one of my favorite strategies because it's super simple, and especially in a down market. I mean, let's be honest, lease options have been hard in the last 5 years. It's been hard to do lease options in the last 5 years because sellers can get whatever price they want for their house and they can put it on the market. It sells within days, multiple bids above asking price. Well, those days are behind us now. That is not happening anymore. I was just looking at Las Vegas on Redfin this morning, and there was 1,500 homes. Is that right? That have dropped their price in the last week or something like that. So there's tons, and there were a couple hundred homes that dropped their price in the last day in Vegas. You look at homes that have been on the market over 90 days, higher than it's been in a really, really long time. So things are changing. We're coming into a recession. We may already be in one. We don't know. The housing market is cooling down. I don't think we'll see the housing decline that we saw in 08, 09. But the fact of the matter is really simple. This is the best time to start learning creative financing because more and more sellers are open to that. And I will tell you this too. I did a podcast this morning. The search terms for like sell my house fast or sell my house cash or we buy houses, the search terms in Google, you look at the trends, they're up 200% over year. So this time compared to last year, that search term is way up. So it's getting more and more sellers are getting motivated.
And this is my whole thing because I work with those types of investors. And I am their concierge partner, essentially, because they have one thing they want to buy it for cash, but they spend a lot of money on marketing. If that sounds like you, I'm your concierge partner because you want to monetize those leads. You can't just, all you got to do is tee it off to somebody that knows how to talk about the rest of these options, which is called modern real estate. Learn to speak modern real estate. But if you want to stay in your lane and you are just looking for cash properties, we have a way to work with you that we can compensate you on a referral fee if we get paid, right?
That's awesome.
All that stuff, guys, is the way to operate. I want to point out one other thing. We didn't talk about seller financing today, which is another type of creative real estate solution that you can offer. But let me tell you what I did in 2018, which is kind of like a market that we're in now, right? Is that I had a seller that I proposed. I had a buyer that wanted to buy the house and they were going to be contingent. They needed to sell their house in order to buy their dream home, which is this house I had listed for sale. So I went to the seller and I said, how about this? Why don't you seller finance, because it was a landlord, why don't you seller finance the house to my buyer client, right? And then they'll sell their house and pay you off, right? He's older guy. And he said, you know what? I don't want to do that because if they fail for some reason, then I have to foreclose. And I said, well, I have a better option for you. Why don't you lease it to them with the option to buy it? Okay. They're living in the house down the street. They'll lease your house, move in with the option to buy it. Then I'll go list their house for sale. It'll sell for more because it's vacant and I can stage it. And then they'll exercise the option to buy and close on your house. No risk because you never gave them the deed. You don't have to foreclose. Guess what we did? We did that deal. Guess how many deals I got out of it? I got the listing side. I got the buyer side. I got the sale of the buyer's side. And then I met a buyer at that house. I sold them a house, right? And guess what's happening this week? That buyer who bought that house fully renovated the house and I'm reselling it. I sold it to them originally for $675 and we're listing it for $1.1 million in about 2 days. Massive amounts of transactions happening here, guys, right? That's what you can learn how to do if you hang out with me. If you hang out with Mariska, you hang out with the Joes, okay? That's what we're talking about, guys. It's called learning how to speak modern real estate. And now is the time to perfect that. You don't want to learn and you want to stay you just have to know somebody who does, so you can pass off the leads that you can't close on to somebody like Joe McCall or myself, so we can turn around and we can pay you as part of our success in getting those closed, right? It's called networking. It's called working together, right? It's called whatever you want to call it, but you're sure missing out if you're not with the flow. And the one other thing why this is awesome, aside from the change in the market, right? In 2018, we didn't have everybody out there like Zillow, Open Door, and everybody else on the planet, every major brokerage firm offering cash offers. We didn't. It was a harder time because people think investors are sleazy or any type of creative solution is a little sleazy. They're used to only traditional. Guess what I say now? Traditional is the sleazy way, okay? Options, providing, it is now widely accepted across the United States, a cash offer. A cash offer, because of, thank you, Zillow, even though you failed and these open doors, you just made the life of Joe McCall and Mariska and myself super easy that know how to speak modern real estate, because it is now widely accepted that you might want to everybody wants a cash offer. I just closed $1 million waterfront house in Port Orchard, and the message was cash offer. We just convert them and pivot them down a line of options. I get leads all the time, $1.2, $1.3 million leads off a cash offer message, because the sellers are now conditioned to think everybody on the planet can get a cash offer, and they don't realize that means they're going to sell their house at a discount.
Yeah.
Okay. So it is a whole different world that we live in. And these types of, it is no longer slimy to present these types of options. It is now slimy to not be able to present these types of options. I'm talking to you, real estate brokers. If all you know how to do is walk into a house and say, hey, let me tell you how to spruce your house up for sale so we can list it. Guess who's the slimy one now? You, right? The world wants options. They want options. And you need to learn how to speak modern real estate. And we're going to teach you that on Thursdays on our podcasts. Joe's going to teach it to you. I'm going to teach it to you. And we're going to supersize blow that out of the water for you in Coeur d'Alene in October. So be there or be square is what I'm saying. Yeah, I'm hyper and I'm excited, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm gonna start bragging that I'm friends with Joe McCall now. That's all I know.
I'm looking forward to meeting you, Julie. You too, Joe.
All right, guys.
See you again, Mariska.
Sounds good.
We'll see you guys all in October. And thanks for showing up today. And over and out. Joe, anything we need to wrap up here, Bauer?
Yeah, you guys can get all of the show notes for this if you wanted to down in the description below on YouTube or on the website at seattleinvestorsclub.com/165 and link up to it, read about what we talked about, all that good stuff.
And you know what, guys, how this was badass today. You're thinking, damn, that was good. And you know how we get more guests like Joe McCall is if you like, subscribe, and give us a review. Please help us out so we can continue to help you guys out because we love doing it. All right. That's all I got. Catch you later.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Seattle Investors Club podcast. If you have questions that you'd like to have answered on the show, shoot us an email at info@seattleinvestorsclub.com. Now go out, take that action, and build that real estate business. Thanks for listening.